Welcome to adilas. This is a tutorial on how to net up your sales tax liability and place that into your payables. And to find your sales tax liability, you would go under System Assets, and this would be done at the end of every month, and go to your invoice homepage. Once you're on the invoice homepage, you're going to see a link here at the top that's your sales tax report. As you pull the report up, it will always default to the last month's liability. So if you do it within the month that it's due, you'll always have these dates here basically following along behind you. You would choose your location and get your report. Once you have the report made, and I'll use this as an example, the total sales tax due for that time period is this $129.37. So you can either create an expense receipt depending on how your state or your municipality requires the sales tax to be paid. You can either sum it up together, or you could split it into pieces, like I could create an expense receipt for the county tax and an expense receipt for the state tax. In this example, what I've done is I've created an expense receipt for this $129.37. And to show you the expense receipt that I have created is I'm going to go back up to the vendor, and I'm going to type in, because I made this to the state of Colorado. So when I find the state, what you would normally do is you would come over here and do create receipt, and we do have a tutorial on how to create receipts and place them on account so they'll show up in your payables. But I want to show you the one that I created. So if I go over here to recent receipts, here's the one that I created, and this is the sales tax due for May. If we take a look at it, you can see that this is the amount, this is the vendor, and of course the type is a balance sheet item. You may want to create one that is balance sheet item that says sales tax in it, so it's specific, so you'll know that you're using that all the time for your sales tax. And this is the expense receipt that was created on 6/1, so this is the day after the month ended, so I know exactly what my sales tax liability was for last month. I put in my due date, and because I'm not going to pay this until the due date, or maybe until a couple days before the due date, I placed it on account, and then that allows for no check assigned yet, and I can come back later to the payables page and pay this. So that's step number one, is to pull the sales tax report, create the expense receipt or expense receipts for that liability, placing it with a line item of balance sheet and sales tax. Step number two is you have to, now that you've used balance sheet, we have to also put that amount on the balance sheet. So to do that, what you would do is I usually write down my expense receipt number 45 and my amount, and then I go back to my home page. I come under System Reports to Balance Sheet, and we do have some additional tutorials on balance sheet. Once I pull the balance sheet, you just pull it and say Get Values, and I'm going to scroll down to the balance sheet item, and it's balance sheet item number 7 for sales tax. Once you do this for a while, you'll remember that number 7 is your balance sheet number, and what you can do is you can, you can just come in here and say I want to go to balance sheet item number 7, and then you can select that and go. But anyway, once you're on balance sheet item number 7, you would go to the detail line items, and you can see down below here I've already put in the detail line item, and the first one that you need to put in is you need to put in what the positive value that's owed for that month is. So on 5/31, which is the last day of the month, the sales tax liability on the balance sheet goes up by $129.37. It doesn't have anything here that it's referenced to. And then on 6/1, which is the day that I created the receipt, and you could create that receipt any day, even if it's just the day that you're going to actually pay the bill. I just like to have the sales tax over into the accounts payable so that you know exactly what your payables are at any given time. So once you create that expense receipt, it would move the value down because this is paying for that tax, and then you would have expense receipt number 45 in here, which is tying it to that expense. If you receive a fee for paying your sales tax, or you receive a percentage for paying your sales tax early, this value here would actually be less value than this. So if they paid you a couple dollars to pay your sales tax early, this would be $127.37 as an example, and then that $2 would stay in this account until the end of the year, and then you would move that money over to other income, and you would declare it as other income off the balance sheet at the end of the year. So once again, this concludes on how to net up your sales tax for the month. And so what I did was I went from the main switchboard homepage under System Assets to the Invoice homepage. From there I went to the sales tax report that's located here. I chose my location. The dates are preset, or you can change the dates. I found my sales tax liability over here. I then created an expense receipt for that. And so if I go back to the expense receipts homepage, you can see the last expense receipt that I created is right here to the state of Colorado. And here it is here as well. Because it's a balance sheet item, I did have to go to the balance sheet. So by going to the balance sheet, I went to, and now that I know that it's balance sheet item number 7, I can simply enter in number 7. It'll take me to the balance sheet item. Here's where the tax liability went up for what was due for the month. Here's where it went down on expense receipt number 45. So this concludes this tutorial, and thank you for choosing adilas.